Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are yet again talking about ear stretching, and this time I want to talk about single flare plugs. Now if you're looking for information about how to stretch safely, I'll link that video here. I've got a whole playlist on my page with all of my videos about stretching. It's the topic that I never run out of things to talk about on it. And as we all know, the best and safest method for stretching is natural stretching with single flare plugs. But not all single flare plugs are created equal. So today I'm going to talk about what style of single flare plugs are my favorite for stretching and why it can make a huge difference to how the stretching process goes for you. See, single flare plugs come in a few different styles and options, and some of them are going to be better for some folks and some of them are going to be worse. So let's take a moment to talk about it. Now the two main variations on single flare plugs that you're going to see if you're interested in stretching are convex and flat back plugs. Convex single flare plugs are always going to be a solid plug, typically made of glass, sometimes stone, and they're going to look kind of like this. They're going to have a rounded backing to them that's very gentle. Flat back single flare plugs come in a variety of styles, and they can also be plugs or eyelets. When we look at glass plugs, like the convex plug we just looked at, these ones, instead of having that soft rounded back, just have a totally flat back. Now sometimes these are very polished where the plug meets the flat back, but sometimes they can have a bit of a harsh edge. Now when we look at these in other materials like stone, they can have an even harsher edge where it's this really sharp right angle where the wearable of the plug drops off into that backing. And then of course we have eyelets. Eyelets are almost always going to have a flat back, but instead of being a solid plug, now we just have the thin wall of the eyelet. Now when we're talking about stretching, convex plugs are going to be the easiest to insert in a fresh stretch. They're also for most people going to be the safest. With convex plugs, it's that gentle rounded backing. So when we're stretching and increasing the size of our ears, that backing slides gently through that tissue. Now for natural stretching safely, our ear is already ready for this stretch, but some people's ears can be a little bit tighter, their tissue can be a little bit more sensitive. They're still ready for the stretch, but the gentle shape of the convex plug is going to make it much more comfortable to insert. With flat back plugs, as long as they're well polished, they're usually going to be okay, but if you tend towards tighter ears or if you have scar tissue in your lobes from piercing gun piercings or previous stretching issues, or if you already have blowouts, flat backs, even well polished, can exacerbate that. That harsh edge where the plug meets the wearable can sometimes catch a lip of tissue on the inside of the ear and push it out the backside as you're inserting it. This basically causes a blowout. Sometimes those edges can catch the inner tissue of your earlobe and cause a tear or pinch and damage things. Flatbacks need to be very well polished, and the point where the wearable meets the backing should be very soft and rounded. It shouldn't be a hard edge, especially if we're using these to stretch with. A lot of companies make and sell single flare plugs, glass, stone, all sorts of materials, but when you look at their pictures online, we see some, like these, which have these nice, gentle, rounded backs that are going to be great for insertion. And then we have some like these, which have these very harsh rear edges that are really sharp and could be damaging. So my suggestion if you're stretching is to go with rounded convex backs unless you are very sure that your ears can handle stretching with a flat back and you're getting them from a company that is reputable, that is going to polish them properly and make them properly. Now another thing to mention is O-ring grooves. If you're stretching your ears, you already know O-rings are like kind of the bane of your existence. You lose them all the time. They're just kind of frustrating to deal with. They're easy to come off the plug. So a lot of companies make plugs that have a groove carved into them for you to wear the O-ring on. But these O-ring grooves can often have the same issues that a flat back plug can have, where that harsh groove can cause damage upon insertion, especially if we're talking about a fresh stretch. Essentially what happens is as you're inserting that plug through your ear, the tissue is tight around the plug and then it finds that O-ring groove and it kind of snaps into place on it. And as you push the plug through your ear, it catches that tissue in the O-ring groove and just sends it straight out the back of your ear. Immediate blowout. I would only ever stretch with something that had O-ring grooves if I was incredibly, actually I just wouldn't stretch with something with O-ring grooves, if I'm being completely honest. But if I were going to, I would want to be so beyond confident that my ears were over ready for this stretch, that I knew that these plugs were going to go in and I had extra gap on my ears where I didn't have to worry about the O-ring groove catching. But in general, I don't suggest stretching with plugs that have O-ring grooves because I do see them often cause blowouts. I definitely suggest saving plugs with O-ring grooves for wearing once you've already been at your size for a little bit. Now, the whole reason why I wanted to make this video is because I wanted to discuss my absolute least favorite style of single flare plug for stretching. Holy shit, me and this type of plug have beef. It's on site if I see it. Single flare steel and titanium eyelets, particularly if they have O-ring grooves. I would like to fist fight every cheap company that is making these and selling these in stretching kits on Amazon and TikTok and Etsy. They are the bane of my existence. They have these incredibly thin walls to them because they're metal plugs. So the portion of the plug that's actually like stretching your ear and that you're wearing, super, super thin. So what can happen as you're inserting that plug on a stretch is that the tissue of your lobe is being stretched very taut around the outer rim of the plug. But because it's just this thin little walled eyelet, it can catch and pinch the remaining tissue and really easily tear and really easily blow out people's ears. And I see tears and blowouts from this style of plug used for stretching all of the time. And a lot of people will argue, oh, it's because they're designed to be used with tapers. Yeah, the edges are really harsh and can blow you out, but that's why you put a taper through your ear and then you guide the plug in with the taper. First of all, we don't need tapers for stretching, so already, why are we trying to defend a plug that is literally very easily able to blow out and damage your ear unless you use it with a tool that you don't need? But usually these tapers are very poorly made and the connection between the plug and the taper isn't exactly perfect. It's also very hard to maintain that perfect connection all the way through your ear on your own. That's even a hard connection for piercers to maintain. So what oftentimes ends up happening is people catch their ear between the plug and the taper and they tear it that way. So just a bad time. But what makes these worse is that so many of them have O-ring grooves on them. So that same problem I discussed earlier with the ridge of the O-ring groove catching a lip of tissue and pinching some tissue inside the ear and then just blasting it out the back into instant blowout happens even worse when we see these little metal single flare eyelets used for fresh stretches. And then if you really want to add insult to injury, there are screwback plugs. I could make a whole video about how much I hate screwback plugs and all of the problems that they cause, but then you're just typically taking external threading and shoving it through your ear to stretch it with, and it is a very bad time. So these are all versions of single flare plugs. And when we as piercers say, oh, safe stretching, stretch with single flare plugs, I think a lot of people just assume that as long as it's a single flare plug, it's safe, and that is not the case. All single flare plugs are not made equally. You want to be really thoughtful about the style and type of plug that you're wearing. If you have more sensitive ears, if you just want to be a little bit more cautious or more intentional with your stretching process, if you have any old scar tissue, convex plugs, those are the way to go. They're the easiest, they're the safest, they're the best thing to stretch with. If you are going to stretch with flat back plugs, make sure you're getting them from a good place, make sure they're well made. And I would personally avoid any thin metal eyelets, really any eyelets in general in a brand new stretch. Save that for wearing a few weeks after stretching. And same thing goes for anything with O-ring grooves. Wait until you've been at your size for at least a couple of weeks and you know it's going to be safe for you to insert them. I hope you have a happy stretching journey and a safe and a healthy stretching journey. Don't forget to go slow, be patient, and listen to your body. I can't wait to sit down and chat again soon. I'm sure we'll still have more to talk about with stretching next time I see you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.